Welcome back to the Cast of Us, an untitled HBO The Last of Us podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, are you ready to get left behind?
I am, buddy. I am. If anyone who is a fan of the game, you know what tonight's episode was going to entail. Yes, we are reviewing episode 7 of The Last of Us Left Behind, directed by Liza Johnson, written by Neil Druckmann. His return to writing the series because he wrote the first episode with Craig Mazin, correct?
Yes.
And then Craig Mazin has kind of taken over the writing duties for the majority of this series, but Neil Druckmann did write this episode, which is partly very much like the downloadable content for the first Last of Us video game, where this originally wasn't part of the game, and then was an add-on you could buy later, which was told in the same sequence of winter when Joel is injured. It is a flashback story of Ellie's time right before she met Joel and the time she spent with her best friend Riley. Um, I'm shocked that they were able to fit Left Behind in the first season of this show because I was skeptical that they were even going to be able to basically adapt the first game in one season of television. But color me impressed every week that they're able to kind of subvert my expectations and pull things off even better than I could have ever imagined. But if you're new to this show, welcome. We're already on episode 7. You can go back and listen to our first 6 recaps, reviews, and breakdowns. But each week, Eric and I will break down the newest episode of The Last of Us at 10 p.m. Eastern, right as the episode airs or finished airing. Eric is brand new to The Last of Us, never played the game. I'm not going to call myself an expert, but I'm a huge fan of the game.
An
Um,
aficionado, if you will.
yeah, that has played it multiple times and is obsessed with this universe. So we do this full spoilers breakdown. We will have no future spoilers, so nothing for the last couple episodes, as well as no spoilers from the future games and things like that. Eric, I will kick it back over to you. How'd you feel about episode 7 of The Last of Us?
Yeah, so I'll sum it up. Sowing the seeds of love, Ellie's personal history told through flashback gives a brief glimpse of neon dreams lost. Bella Ramsey reaps the rewards of pathos, proving once and for all that she was perfectly cast in the role.
I absolutely agree, man. This is much like we said last week was kind of the Joel highlight episode. I mean, the series itself has been a highlight for both of them, right? Like they're the two leads, their relationship developing, just them being both perfectly cast in our opinions. It took me a little longer to get on the Bella Ramsey, train of her being Ellie, then maybe I think some people were in that same boat. But I agree with you. I think this was her episode, obviously being a flashback told from her perspective, and she just absolutely crushed it, dude. To see this kind of part of the game so faithfully adapted, everything in that mall and the 5 wonders of the mall and things like that, and Riley, that character just be so perfectly adapted. Slight changes from the game based on, I mean, much like the rest of the series, like taking out some action sequences, rearranging some things, but still being so purely adapted. Like everything from Etta James's "I Got You, Babe" is that dance sequence is straight from the game. The arcade, the masks, the like it's all just they do such a good job of making it feel like it's ripped from the game, but also feeling like its own thing. And yeah, Bella Ramsey and just absolutely crushes it
And
this
Storm
episode.
Reed are
Storm Reed,
both,
yes,
yeah,
is
really good.
fantastic as well. Do you want to just get into the breakdown, or do you have any more thoughts before we kick it off?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is worth talking about, and I'll get into it more because I think flashbacks in general are a hard sell at times when it comes to storytelling because it's usually a pretty lazy way of getting, a personal history of somebody or backstory sort of, inserted into a narrative, and it kind of is the laziest way of doing things when you're writing a script. um but within the context of this episode, it works because one, you have Joel, who is incapacitated at this moment, and
Not
you know,
dead. Everyone thought
no,
maybe at the end of last
but
week he
he's fighting
was,
for
but
his life, and
yeah.
he's in a state that he can't really do anything.
My
And
mom will continue watching if everyone saw that
yeah,
text message she sent me on Twitter.
and watching it as well, I could also see a lot of people being frustrated with this episode because it could be considered a time filler or waster to get to
Fair.
Joel coming back, and it's like, okay, well, now I have to wait a whole other episode to see kind of what happens with this, and this was all just more character development. But again, this is important to Ellie's story, and also seeing it from the perspective of Ellie being kind of molded into a potential Fedra officer and having political beliefs and ideology that's been fed to her, in this military, complex. So when you're watching this, the Ellie you're seeing in this flashback is still somewhat defending Fedra in a way
Yeah.
that I think is kind of interesting, where you're seeing Firefly, Riley, as we come to learn, has been recruited by the Fireflies, and so her ideology is changing. Um, you know, Ellie is still kind of on the fence about it, and having this kind of back and forth about their politics, but then also sort of their own relationship and their friendship, and sort of where that goes. You're getting another kind of capsule episode in the way that part 3 was. It's more self-contained because it's in a memory, and in thinking about how this character, anytime Ellie gets close to somebody,
They
tragedy
die.
always happens. And so the idea of kind of using your sense of humor, or developing a shield in order to combat some of that stuff, because Ellie in the flashback, while stubborn and a little bit obnoxious, isn't as quippy, I think, in
Yep.
the flashback. So we kind of now also see why maybe she's a little bit more,
A defense mechanism and stuff
yeah.
like that too. Yeah.
And so, and also, again, this is really important, is that this was being set up in episode 2, when Tess is
I was gonna
talking
say that too. Yeah.
to Ellie about going into the Boston Mall, and
And I
hanging out there. So
And I think that's why I think this flashback episode works so much, because there are a lot of payoffs if you were really paying attention to the conversations. Whether, I mean, us people who have played the game knew this was coming based on those conversations and things like that. But people who do remember that conversation with Tess, who do remember Ellie finding the Mortal Kombat cabinet and talking about that with Joel. Um, Numerous times throughout the series of her mentioning, a friend that she had, or even in the last episode, the payoff to that conversation where she has with Joel, the really emotional conversation where she brings up Joel's daughter, and Joel goes, "You have no idea what loss is." And Ellie's come back and being like, "What we just said, everyone I cared about has either died or left me." And like, I feel like that's why this flashback episode works so much and doesn't feel like just filler for me. Or like, and maybe you could go, well, we already sort of got this from Ellie's conversations with other people. Where did we need a whole episode to show that? But I do think, like, much like we said with when we meet Bill and Frank, and even Henry and Sam, and all the kind of side characters or guest characters that we meet throughout the show, um it really funnels back to Joel and Ellie's relationship, and ultimately where the end of the series is going. So I've even, obviously, this book ended by Joel being, hurt but alive in this house at the beginning, and Ellie deciding, Joel wants her to leave him and just go because he thinks he's a goner, and that, like, basically wants to protect her. So he just go back to Tommy, he tells her, and Ellie not giving up. And I feel like, so even this whole thing of her relationship with Riley, and what she went through there, and her discovering that she's immune, when, it's not shown on screen, but something we've talked about often, that sometimes you don't need to show Riley turning on screen and things like that. You could just, you know what happened, and that's when Ellie discovers that she's immune, but her best friend and romantic interest, uh she thought she was going to die with her, and they were going to turn together, and then obviously she didn't, and probably had to similarly, we talked about even Ellie saying, like, I've had to hurt someone before or shoot people before. And like that was alluding to maybe even Riley, right? Because she might have had to do something there, but we don't see it. And I think even that is powerful. And it all goes back to, like I was just saying, Ellie's decision at the end to not leave Joel. She doesn't want to end up alone. She cares about this guy now and doesn't want to just leave him to die. She wants to save him. So like, I think the episode completely works, and is was a weirdly, again, like many of these episodes, like you could have even said last week's was kind of like this too, where you're getting an episode that's not chill, but is like a little uplifting, right? Like you're going, oh, okay, like this is nice. They're at a mall. They have this relationship. Sure, they're talking about their best friends, but Riley planned this amazing kind of date night sort of thing for Ellie, and knowing that she was going to have to leave her, and they were best friends, and obviously that develops to something else. But like this really cute night of showing her these five wonders of the mall, and you're getting kind of not a feel good, but as feel good as you could possibly get in an episode of The Last of Us. And then, much like The Last of Us, every ending of an episode kind of has to tear your heart out. I don't think it can just end on a nice note, right? So I think it's consistent in that sense, and I feel like everything goes back to Joel and Ellie's relationship and their characters, and I think this episode does a really really good job with that. Um, that being said, let's get into those five wonders of the mall. The episode starts after the credits, no cold open again. I'll keep pointing that out because I think that was just very much a first couple episode thing. We open on a horse inside of a house,
Well, first we
and
see
like a garage.
we see the so it we're basically outside of Salt Lake City at this point,
Yes,
and we see
snowy
kind
and
of the
a
remains
home.
of a ghost town
Yeah,
community where everything's been picked over and abandoned. And this is one of those cliche things as well that I kind of found not again a deal breaker in any way, but the blood trail from
sure.
the
In the
out
snow
in the
or
snow
whatever.
to the
Yeah,
house. It's such a weird thing because, like, thinking about, okay, well, Joel, they were probably still on the horse as they were going, because it almost looks like she dragged him, like the way that the blood kind of is spattered on
yeah,
the snow. It almost more looks like a dragging than, like, just blood continually coming out. And the way that it's
yeah.
it's on the ground, well, if Joel was on the horse, a lot of it would probably still be like soaking into his clothing. So not to say that some of
And
it wouldn't get on
it
the
would have
ground.
dripped a little bit, but it did look like someone was dragged through the snow,
Yeah,
even the way that the tracks are. And maybe, oh well, he did fall off the horse, right? Which we know at the end of the last episode, and maybe Ellie couldn't have gotten him back on the horse. So we don't know if she could have dragged him if they were
right,
close to. That's what it looks like. If you're even looking at the tracks in the snow, um, it sort of looks like he was dragged by Ellie, because I had imagined she couldn't get him back on the horse. So whether she tied him to the horse and dragged him that way,
right.
or
Because
literally
the
dragged his
tracks though
body,
don't look
but
like like a horse. It almost looks like a tire
it's like a
track.
sled or something like
Yeah,
that, like a sled, or yeah, it looks like a. Yeah, so she might have put him on something and dragged him. Anyways, it's this derelict town, this derelict house. Um, blood trail into the house. It cuts to a horse inside of this house. Um, you see bicycles and obviously Ellie and Joel's backpacks and a bloody mattress and things like that. And then we cut to Ellie working, to save Joel. He's bleeding from his stomach still. She's trying to put pressure on the wound. He is struggling immensely. This is the moment that I just discussed where he basically is telling Ellie, like, leave me, go back to Tommy.
go north.
He'll, yeah, go north to Tommy. And she's flustered and frustrated and sad. He literally has to push her away when she says, like, shut the fuck up, Joel. And it doesn't look like she wants to leave him. She puts his jacket on top of him, and great acting from both Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. But you can tell in that moment that, like, even though Joel still just wants to protect Ellie, and I think this goes back to his fears, which he talked about in the last episode, of of failing her and that he's just going to die or get her killed. You can only imagine in this moment, like he started to have those, we said, those building moments of those confident moments at the end of last episode where he, he shoots the target right in the center. He's feeling like he can protect Ellie. He's with her. They're laughing together and they're building that relationship. But then ultimately he still gets shanked by that guy, even though he does save her from them. So in this moment, I can only assume all those fears and that failure that he talked about in the last episode are coming up, which he's still just trying to push her away. Um, and Ellie might even take that as like, you don't believe that I can, save you kind of thing. I don't, possibly, but and Ellie might even doubt it based on this flashback that we're about to get.
Well,
So Ellie
at the end of the
basically,
last episode too, right? You had Ellie basically being like, I don't know what to do. Like
yeah,
I need you to do this. Like I can't be on my own.
absolutely. So Ellie goes up the stairs. She opens the door from this basement that Joel is in. And then we cut back to, we don't get a timeline of when this is, but it seems to be, a couple months probably before um she meets up with Marlene and Joel and Tess. So Ellie is running around in a school gymnasium. She's listening to, what's the song? Do you have it, Eric?
All or None by
Oh,
Pearl
by
Jam
Pearl Jam. Okay.
on a Walkman.
Yeah, on a Sony Walkman. Uh, and I think that's a little nod to uh, the use of Pearl Jam in The Last of Us Part 2, which I don't think we are going to get because of the time period change. Um, I'm trying to. Am I. What's. It's Better Days is the song, right? Is that what it is? God, everyone's gonna be
For
yelling
Last
at
of Us
me. I'll
2.
get it in a second. Yeah,
If
yeah.
it's Last of Us 2, you're on your own on that one. I can only tell
To I
you if
know,
the
why am I
song is right.
asking you? I'm uh not Future Days, sorry. Um and is Future Days Pearl Jam, right? Yeah, Future Days Pearl Jam. Yeah, I'm right. Okay, I got it, everyone. I said Better Days, it's Future Days Pearl Jam, which comes out after 2003, meaning, and it's an integral part. That's not a spoiler, everyone. It's an integral part of The Last of Us Part 2. So I think this is their little nod, tip of the hat to them, uh, 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 to Pearl Jam, which I'm curious if they'll still use Pearl Jam in whenever the second season comes around, or if they'll find a different song by a different artist. But I like that she's listening to Pearl Jam here. She's running around a gymnasium. Obviously, it's some sort of military school, like we mentioned. She Another kid in her class is kind of an asshole to her, rips her
Bethany.
Walkman off of Bethany, fucking Bethany. Rips her Walkman off and then is just kind of a prick to her. um and basically Ellie just goes crazy on her. They get into a fight, they beat the shit out of each other.
You don't
Ellie
see any of this
clearly,
though. That's the
yeah,
thing. So what it's also setting
yeah,
up is that um you know, Bethany's like, okay, well, I don't want pick up the pace. I don't want to continue to do this. And then,
yeah,
Bethany, Ellie's like, I don't really want to fight. And Bethany's like, you can't fight. Like your friend's the one that does the fighting. And then
right,
it cues it in a way where it's like the cut is like, as soon as, the, the fight's about to begin, it cuts
it
to,
cuts.
um, Ellie in Captain Kwan's office, waiting for um, whatever sentence or punishment is going to be handed down.
Yeah, Ellie has a black eye. She's meeting with this Fedra officer. He basically, classic kind of going to the principal's office kind of thing, where, or a guidance counselor or something like that, where they kind of go like, what the fuck are you doing? You're better than this. You could do anything if you put your mind to it, kind of thing. Even though it's coming from the Fedra side of things, of being like, listen, do you want to be shoveling shit, or do you want to be an officer that gets to have easy days, air conditioning in the summer, heating in the winter, basically just doing your part? Or and then do you want to be the one in like basically in control of the Bethanies of the world, or do you want them to be the ones kind of, leading things? I think this is how the kind of conversation goes. It's that classic, like, young kid who's not applying themselves kind of
Yeah,
thing,
I've done
right?
I was waiting for, so Terry Chen's the name of the actor who
Yeah.
plays the captain, and he's most recently was in Viggo Mortensen's Falling. Um, I was waiting for him to like turn his chair the other way and sit in it and be like,
Yeah.
okay, kid,
Backwards.
let's
Yeah.
have this moment.
Yeah.
But I what I really do like in that scene while she's sitting in the office is that she turns the photo of his family towards
Yeah.
her, and then when he comes
Mhm.
in he turns it around, and when he's giving that whole speech about being an officer or being a grunt, he starts off with a, like, this is just like an actor prop kind of thing, with a mug, and puts the mug on one side and it's like, this is grunt life, blah blah blah, and says what you
Yeah.
just said, and then, or and then takes, the keys, and
The
then puts the
keys. Yeah.
keys on the table, and gives the speech about
Like, you
being,
can have the
in
key to,
control.
yeah. Yeah, and the keys, I think there's a little reference to the Naughty Dog logo, or maybe
Yes,
Crash Bandicoot or
it's
something like
on.
that. It's like the keychain,
Yeah,
right? So I thought that was a cute thing. But yeah, it's that classic kind of, yeah, young kid who doesn't apply themselves and is like, "Well, what do you want to do, Ellie?" Basically, like, you're good, but you're kind of you feel like you're almost too good kind of thing.
you're
That's
so
why her
smart, you're
attitude comes
stupid.
from, yeah, that kind of thing, which is, we've all heard before. and
Yeah,
and I but I like it in this situation, especially coming from Fedra, right? It's still the government who's in charge here. She's an orphan at this point. And basically, like, we're in control of your life here. Either apply yourself and you can have the keys to the kingdom, or you can kind of just be
or you'll be
shoveling shit kind of
shoveling
thing.
shit, baby.
um yeah. So, Ellie asks to have her Walkman back and basically says that she'll go along with this or whatever, just because, like, what other choice does she really have? It's basically like the best of the worst kind of thing. So then we cut to her bedroom at this military school. We see some drawings of dinosaurs and different things on the wall. We see the first no pun intended
Intended, yeah.
book, no pun intended book that says "This otter be good," and then there's a photo of an otter. Love a good otter reference. Love a good otter pun. Otters, my favorite animal, so I'm thrilled with this. We see Ellie reading a Savage Starlight. Again, calling back to that episode with Henry and Sam. Um, of her collecting these comics. We see her reading it, and we see some illustrations from there. Um, as she is either sleeping or lies down to go to bed, we see someone breaking
Oh,
into her.
just a
Did
quick
I miss
thing.
something?
Another thing that's also worth mentioning, and it's a cutaway or an insert shot, is of the cassettes of Ella James and Aha
Yeah.
on the table,
Yeah.
which will be the soundtrack of this episode.
Yeah. We see an Aha cassette and an Etta James cassette, correct? Yeah.
Ella James, yeah.
Um, is it Ella James or Etta?
Let me
I thought it
just
was Etta,
double
but
check.
I could be an idiot. I got you, not Sonny and Cher. Etta James, I
It's
was
Etta
right.
James?
ETTA.
Okay.
Yeah, Etta James. Well,
Oh,
finally I'm right for
I was
once.
mistaking
Not
it with Ella King, maybe.
yeah, it's
Ella.
okay. I mean, finally I was right and you were wrong. Usually you're the one correcting me. So, yeah, we do see that insert shot of those songs, which we'll hear a bit later in the episode. So Ellie goes to bed. Uh, it seems like in the middle of the night, someone at about 2 in the morning, 1:53 to be exact.
Again, playing with
Someone,
time, right? Like in the
yep,
first
yep.
episode where we see, Joel's life before outbreak day, and Sarah's
We're kind
perspective
of
about
seeing,
going to bed and then waking up
might have even
into,
been the same time or a similar time when
yeah,
Sarah
around
wakes
2
up in the
a.m.
middle of the
Yep.
night. Mhm.
It was 2 a.m.
Um, we see a Mortal Kombat 2 poster on the wall, which is a callback to that, Ellie talking about that in the grocery store, or the farmer's market that she's in, and we'll see that later in the episode as well. Someone breaks into Ellie's room. At this point, could be someone trying to attack her or anything like that. Puts their hand over her mouth, and basically it is revealed that it is her friend Riley, who ran away months ago. And Ellie hasn't seen in quite some time. Scares the shit out of Ellie. Ellie pulls out her switchblade. Riley says like, "Oh, I thought you would have liked it. I was just trying to kind of pull a prank on you." Ellie's been like, "Where the fuck have you been?" They basically have a conversation that Riley left because she is this where she reveals what she was assigned to, or is that later?
No, that's later at the
Yeah.
merry-go-round. But
Yeah, right,
in
right,
this
right,
scene
right.
as
But
well, Ellie mentions that she's been gone for 3 weeks. I'm just reading basically off my notes. There's a great
no,
inner
please,
space
yeah.
poster on
Yeah, I saw
Ellie's
that. Yeah.
uh, side of the room. But again, the other thing that I think is a really important piece of just knowing like the time that Riley's been gone is just seeing the other side of the room with the made bed and everything kind of like lit in a way that's like, oh, it hasn't been used in a while.
Yeah.
And that's just
Where they
again,
were roommates.
yeah, it's a very subtle thing of being like, okay, well, this other person who is a roommate hasn't been here for so long, and to the point where it's like it just looks like this is a completely unused side of the room.
Yeah. So they kind of have a long conversation where Ellie is sort of upset at Riley for running away. But Riley, explains that she's been recruited by the Fireflies, and basically that's what she's been doing. But she wants Ellie to come with her and have a great night. She's like, just come with me, have a great night, even though Ellie seemed pissed at Riley and doesn't really want to go. Obviously, clearly missed her friend, but still mad that she just ran away without saying anything and just left behind. Um, Left her behind here. So Ellie reluctantly agrees, saying that she needs to be back early for whenever her wake up call is, but that she will go with Riley. So they leave out of Ellie's window, and Riley goes like, "Don't worry, these guys are morons. They're not going to be patrolling. There's going to be no one out on the streets, so you don't have to worry about it." In that conversation as well, Riley does see Ellie's black eye, and they talk about the fight with Bethany, as well as what happened there.
And that she already fucked
Um,
Bethany up, and because
yeah,
Riley was like, oh
she's in the yeah, she's like, "Oh yeah, Riley said I'll go and fuck her up," and then Ellie's like, "Well, I already did. She's been in the infirmary for like a week or something, right? Or for
yeah.
the
And
majority of the
also
week."
in this scene before they leave, Ellie changes, and then Ellie asks Riley not to look when changing, and Riley's like, you kind of act weird when you do that."
Yeah. No, I like that, hinting at that. So they leave out of the window. Immediately, a Fedra patrol comes by. And she's like, "Well, they're not that fucking stupid," because, like, immediately they almost get caught by the Fedra officers. But they're able to dodge out of the way. They walk down some alleyways, and just basically catch up on things as they're walking.
Carol,
Um,
there's a conversation about Carol like picking and choosing your fights, and then um they talk about how Riley, beat up Carol so badly that she was in
right.
the intensive ward for a while.
No, that's the conversation I was
Yeah,
thinking of, not Bethany, but yes, thank you.
yeah,
Where Riley talked about beating the shit out of Carol. They climb through uh, a window and go into like an abandoned apartment building. Ellie makes a joke about the rusty mailboxes and is like, "Is this what you wanted to show me? They're amazing." And like, um, basically, I like the flashlight bit here because it's straight from the games. You had to do this weird thing in the video games where uh, if your flashlight was going out like it is there, you had to shake your controller to make it like basically bang on the flashlight to get it work again. Riley makes a joke about how Firefly flashlights are
better.
better, and then Ellie goes, 1 point for the anarchists. They go upstairs to the first is yeah, they go up a couple floors. They see a man who is
Well,
dead.
Ellie
And
in
it's
that
like,
scene says
is this
like
the joke about
like
how
how
far
many
are we going up or
yeah,
whatever?
and then it's like
Yeah.
it's like the seventh floor because the door says like 7A. It's like only a couple of
I
flights.
like the callback here, and you see the relationship between Riley and Ellie, and the relationship between Joel and Ellie, because the
Yeah,
same thing kind of happened when they had to go up, and Joel was going, how far up do we have to go? Or Ellie asked him the same thing, and they had to go. It was almost 7 floors as well, I think, right?
Yeah.
With Joel's bad knees. So I like the call back there. They turn down a hallway, and it's revealed with their flashlight that there is a corpse in the hallway on the ground. He's kind of sitting dead. Does not look to be infected at this point. So they walk over to him, and they find that he has pills in one hand and a bottle of whiskey, I believe, in the other hand. Um, so clearly overdosed or just mixed the pills
Or
and the
suicide.
alcohol to either. Yeah, it looks like it was intentional is what they said. um so they steal the whiskey, they smell it, they go, oh, this isn't moonshine, this seems like what it came from before, like it was an actual bottle of whiskey from pre outbreak. And they're like, oh, he must have spent every what do they call it, every like food stamp he had for this, basically every stamp he had. Um, this moment, it's happened a couple times on this series, which is very video gamey, but not necessarily believable, is when something conveniently collapses, either as characters enter a room or right after they deal with him. So like right where this man is sitting, right after they take the whiskey from him, uh, for a jump scare, the floor conveniently collapses where he is and his body falls to the ground. I like it as a moment between these two characters, like laughing at the um absurdity, but like also showing that this world that they live in, like death is very normal, people deal with it, and you see dead bodies and it doesn't affect you all that much because of all the other fucked up shit you have to deal with and see. But the floor collapsing is the one thing, like it happened in the museum right as they entered the one room with the clickers. The outside collapses right as they go through, and it's a very video game thing, so you don't backtrack or you don't go to a certain area, or it's just for a jump scare. So
But it's
didn't
also just a
love
horror
that, but
movie
it's
thing
fine.
too, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a genre thing where, in this case he's not infected, so he's not going to come back to life and like,
So you
attack
gotta
them.
scare you somehow.
Yeah, so it's like let's
Mhm.
just have the floor cave in, which I mean is I guess somewhat believable, but like at the same time it's like wouldn't all of the floor cave in and not just like the
Yes.
one part because of
That's
them there
mainly it's a
too?
nitpicky thing. It's very stupid, like who cares?
Yeah.
But I still I don't know. It's just something that you're like, yeah, okay, this show very obviously not realistic. But could be realistic. More and more people are talking about that. The way that they try to explain the science could be true. Maybe it wouldn't happen exactly like this, but it's those types of things that just go, oh yeah, okay, this is based on a video game for me, which is fine. It's just a very nitpicky thing. So, anyways, they go up to the roof of this building, to share this bottle of whiskey, which they both don't seem to like. But as kids, I remember being a teenager, stealing a bottle of booze from one of our parents or something, and it reminded me of that, of like two teenagers where you wander the streets, and we used to do this, and we weren't in a post-apocalyptic wasteland where things could kill us, but
Well, you were in
you'd go to a
Oshawa still.
park. Yeah, it's pretty close, right? Yeah, good, good bit. Um, yeah, walking around Oshawa, just drinking from, a bottle of whatever fucking green apple vodka or some
Ugh.
bullshit. Awful, just awful stuff. Um, so anyways, I like this, that it reminded me of that kind of thing, even of them going into the mall, and this story of like that's what kids, at least me and my friends would do, and I think many other kids, when you didn't want to be at home because there were rules at home, you would sneak out of the house or stay out late, and you would just go wander the streets with your friends. You would go into I remember one time, Eric, we tried climbing up to the roof of an Arby's and and we got caught by the security, and had to run away from, it's just a bunch of dumb shit you do as a teenager and as a kid. So I kind of like that this captured that in this episode of two best friends, even in this world, still wanting to do that.
Well, there's
So
even a
they go up on the
fantasy element to it though as well, right? Like the idea of like spending a night in the mall and doing whatever you want and having fun. Like it's one of those things where I think, when you are in that age group, that's kind of one of those scenarios that you always think of in your head, and kind of like, you know getting to do the things that when your parents aren't around, or when authority figures aren't around, that you can get away with. And like, just like that idea of you know running around carefree and kind of being a latchkey kid in that way.
Yeah, and even if they don't have that memory of what a mall is, I guess they still have what a mall means, right? And like, or the things that are in that mall. Like we see Ellie with the Mortal Kombat poster and some of those movie posters. So it's like they know the history of what things were like before and what a mall probably represented. So I feel like that would still be appealing. But we do find out later that they think the mall is littered with infected, which is why people don't go into that mall. um, I will say in the game as well, the sequence is not, I don't know if it's intercut, but it's also different than in the show where Ellie is trying to find like antibiotics for Joel. So she goes into a mall in Colorado where a helicopter, like a military or a medical helicopter has crashed, and she's trying to make her way through that mall to get the antibiotics for Joel. So that's kind of where the memory of this other mall comes, but they kind of take that out of this story, which involved Ellie like fighting off some other raiders and infected and stuff like that. So they just kind of took everything out there and just focused on the Riley and Ellie story in the flashback sequence. So they're up on the roof, sharing the whiskey. Ellie wants to hold Riley's gun, and Riley's like, they kind of told me that, I'm not allowed anyone else to touch it. And then Ellie told me they're not allowed to touch it. And she's like, just give me your fucking gun. And then, so I like that moment of that she does give Ellie the gun. And you can kind of even see her fascination at this point, which then again goes back to, again, all those little moments I think are payoff from all the things that they built up with her relationship with Joel, right? And we're seeing the origins of a lot of that with her friendship with Riley here. Um, so then Ellie, in a classic like teenager who has a crush on someone kind of thing, um, is both trying to get information of why she ran off to the Fireflies, but also trying to get information about like uh who she's interested in dating and things like that, where she goes, oh, so what happened, did you find this Firefly guy and run off and marry him, and then that's why you wanted, or no, run off and be with him to join the Fireflies? And Riley's like, oh yeah, we're married now, kind of thing, like being sarcastic um back to her. So again, I like this back and forth between them where you both see that their close friendship, and I don't know, maybe it's just me projecting because I played the games and know how, that Ellie is gay and that her relationship with Riley was romantic, that maybe I'm reading into that more. I don't know if people who didn't know, like you knew before this that Ellie was gay, right,
Yeah,
Eric?
yeah.
And then so I
But I
wasn't
knew it
sure
through
if like,
you, because like you've
yeah,
talked about the video game, and or the two games in
yeah,
detail, in
yeah,
terms of the relationship. And like in part two, like she's in a relationship with, spoiler alert for the
no
part
spoilers, but
two, but
she's, yeah, she has a relationship in the second
yeah.
game, yeah. But and I don't think it's a spoiler. Like Ellie's on the cover of the second game. Everyone, all right? Okay, that's not a spoiler. Um, I yeah, I just, this show showcasing gay relationships. I think both with the Bill and Frank episode and in this episode, I think is, we're getting more and more of it on TV, especially mainstream TV. But like, um, it's just interesting that The Last of Us being, this hugely popular game and things like that, and this is it's a prominent thing in both the video game and the show, which I love. So
But it also
I don't
doesn't
know, but
make a big
I'm reading
deal of
into
it
this thing.
as well, which I
No,
kind of
that's what I
like
think
as
is
well.
great, right?
It's
It
just
is a
a
big deal, but
it's
it's
just a
also
romantic
just part of it,
relationship.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not this huge even revelation, I think. It just plays it like it's any two teenagers flirting and having a crush and stuff like that, which I
And
just
one
love. And
being a
same with the
little bit
Bill.
older than the other one as well, right? And
Yep.
kind of Ellie also looking up to Riley, but also kind of being mad at her still about leaving. And then you do have more of that political ideology, that fight between sort of Fedra and the Fireflies, and what it means to be, an anarchist versus a dictatorship and fascism and things like that, and that's this other conversation that's going on through this entire episode, really.
Sequence, yeah.
Well,
And well,
yeah,
yeah,
through the
especially the whole episode, but
because again, it's just interesting to think like Ellie was coming at this like the way that we were first introduced to her, like she is somewhat apprehensive towards the Fireflies having locked her up, but it makes even more sense that like her being conditioned by Fedra for so long, and only knowing Fedra, even though the Fireflies put her there, um, that a lot of that would wear off, even though she is still rebellious within the confines of this institution.
she's still a young kid, right? And
Yeah,
that's what she's taught in this school. So of course you're gonna believe it. It's even like, you know, ask many different people of how they feel about modern government today. We're taught everything is for a reason, and I feel like you're susceptible to a lot of that when you're younger, and you don't question things as much, although you do question a lot as well, right? So it
yeah.
is that kind of both things. So in this conversation, I think Ellie asked Riley like why and like what happened and how she joined the Fireflies. I think basically
There's talk of Marlene, but not her
right.
name's not
Yeah.
said. She says that an older woman in her 40s or maybe 50s
Saw her
saw that she
sneaking
was sneaking
around,
out
right?
of solitary confinement in the hole, and that she was really good at kind of avoiding, getting caught, and that she would be perfect to join, to be
The
recruited.
Fireflies.
Yeah.
And then Ellie's like, that's easy as that. They just kind of, you know, they just recruit you that easily. And she's like, yeah, that's how it happens. So, this is like you said, throughout the whole episode, you get some of Ellie questioning this and saying, well, the Fireflies are terrorists and they, they blow up buildings and, there's argument to be made of what they're doing is good or bad, and you can kind of see that from Ellie's perspective here. And but she obviously cares about her friend and wants to hear her side of things, and but doesn't like maybe some of the violence. And it's much like we've seen, even with Kathleen's group, which weren't Fireflies, but ultimately went up against Fedra. And you could say like, well, they're going up against the fascists who were, rapists and murderers and brutalizing people. And but then you saw how ruthless and brutal Kathleen's group was too, right? So it's just like this whole conversation of who is the good guy, who is the bad guy, I think is a constant throughout this series, which I think is a really interesting conversation to have that will continue to have this entire season and throughout this entire series. Um, and is there any good guys or bad guys really? Um, there are good guys and bad guy things that happen, but it's very much a gray area in this
Well, a
world.
gray zone, Matt,
Um,
because they're living in the QZ, gray zone,
mhm.
quarantine zone.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
No,
So
no
anyways,
worries.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. So Riley, they finish this conversation and Riley goes, okay, let's go. And then they're jumping across the rooftops, which I like of again, call back to Ellie not being really afraid of walking across that wooden beam, right? So
Yeah.
you're starting to get some of those character moments that we got from Ellie and where they come from. And maybe she would have been afraid, but her best friend Riley is the one that's just like, fuck it, let's go, let's just do this. And then Ellie being a follower at this moment to Riley.
I
Um,
love when people are
so they
jumping over things. It's just there's something about it that I kind of love. Like it reminds me of
really,
in
yeah,
Tremors when they're pole vaulting
yeah,
over the rocks and you see them kind of all at once, like going from one rock to
yeah.
another. Just simple things like that, I think, is a lot of fun in terms of how somebody would get from one place to another in a period where transportation is there's no way to sort of drive or take
And
a
you don't want to be
train
seen
or
either,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So
So I like
rooftop.
that where these buildings are close enough and Riley knows this that you can kind of, even alluding to how she was so good at sneaking around and why the Fireflies recruited her, right? Like knowing these routes over these rooftops where there would be no Fedra patrols or anything like that. Um, they eventually get to uh the end of their journey here, which was pretty quick. And then she's like, okay, this is what I wanted to show you, which they see a view of the mall from above. Ellie goes, this is what you wanted, the fucking mall? She's like, they sealed that up ages ago and that it's riddled with infected and things like that. And then Riley goes, well, if it was sealed off, then why isn't it sealed off? And then it cuts to them uh, going in through what seems like a hole in the roof of the mall. So they sneak in. Riley mentions to Ellie that she wants to show her something, and basically tells her to just fucking. She's like, just go in that other room and tell me when you're there. Um,
There's also
she,
just before then though as well, when they're still on the roof, there's
yeah,
that conversation about how the Fireflies bomb that one area, and how Ellie is still kind of apprehensive about what Riley is doing, and how the
yeah,
Fireflies will, like, how basically Fedra is starving its people, and then and then the Fireflies are bombing locations and killing
yeah.
soldiers or things like that, and it's like, well, we
And there could
try
be
not
collateral
to.
damage there too. Yeah,
Yeah, and
like
then with the mall thing as well, it's important because before they go to the mall, there's that line about how you shouldn't always believe everything you're told, from Riley, and I
thank
think
you.
that's
Yeah,
another really important piece of info there.
I agree. Thank you for pointing that out. But yeah, that goes back to kind of that whole thing of like, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy? Are they both doing bad things, kind of thing? Um, they go into the mall. Riley explains that what's going on, and then they're kind of still arguing back and forth. And she's like, just go, just fucking trust me and go. Ellie makes a joke about Riley luring her there to kill her. It's that classic kind of like back and forth between best friends who are kind of being asses to one another, but it's kind of out of love, if that makes sense. Like someone you really care about or really close to. I think it's that not teasing, but just that forceful kind of like, just fucking do it, just trust me kind of thing. So Ellie goes out again, her flashlight's busted. As she goes out, and then Riley flips onto the power of the mall, and you get this great shot of Ellie looking into the darkness. But then, as all the lights in the mall start to come on, and you get that kind of gorgeous, especially for someone who probably, there's electricity in the QZ and things like that, but this place like a mall that would be this giant thing to them, and all these lights, both neon and warm, and just all light up in the mall from this world that you were never a part of, and it was probably this almost like this dream, right? So I really like this moment as all the stores and it's all broken down and busted, and um basically just Ellie being mesmerized by these lights coming on. I really like this moment.
Yeah, and Riley also mentions that because they've brought more people into this QZ in Boston, that they've had to open up more sort of areas and turn on the electricity within the grids, and so that's why
Okay,
the power to the mall
power would work.
would work. And also, like, there's a question there of like, oh, wouldn't Fedra be able to detect that we're using, and it's like, no, they don't notice because it's just brand new, like the area's kind of still in its early stages of being set up, so they wouldn't even notice.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. Cause yeah, I like that line of dialogue because the mall also seems to have like a glass roof as well at certain points. So you go like, well, wouldn't they notice that all these lights turned on? Do the
Yeah,
lights outside of the mall turn on? XYZ. So I just like that of, people, they know people will call that out.
yeah.
So put a line of dialogue in there to kind of suspension of disbelief, right? This is when Aha's Take on Me kicks in, which anyone fan of the second game knows that that's also a nod to the second game. I love that they're planting the seeds for some of these things and making, again, where Take on Me in the second game, no spoilers, doesn't really have like, we don't know where it comes from Ellie, like, other than she probably just enjoyed the song. Where I like that they're planting the seeds here for when that moment in Last of Us Part 2 happens with Take on Me, you kind of know where that comes from and her love of that song and things like that. And same with Pearl Jam if they end up using Pearl Jam. Um, and uh and Etta James obviously at the end of the episode. But I love that they are planting the seeds. The one thing the series has done a really good job of is, if you know where this story's going, they're doing a much better job of giving you hints of that, or setting up things much earlier, making the themes work a lot better, and will be more cohesive, and having those payoffs be actual payoffs in the second season and part two, when they were just great moments in their own right from part two. But I like that they're able to look at this whole story, and they're probably even making Last of Us Part Three right now. That's the rumor, that with Neil Druckmann working on Last of Us Part Three, which is why ultimately I think he's only written a couple episodes of this show while still being obviously a consultant and working on it with Craig Mazin, but Craig Mazin being the leading force behind the whole thing. Um, I really do think they're able to look at part one with part two that already came out and had reactions, good or bad, mostly good critically, but mixed audience wise. And then it's kind of like the Last Jedi of the things, where it's like, all right, we'll get into that much later.
Yeah.
Um, and then them writing part three, I think, will really help this feel like this really cohesive kind of thing. Anyways, going off on a side tangent. So Aha kicks in. The escalator turns on. I love this moment of being like, oh, I forgot to set it up, but Riley does say that she's brought Ellie here to show her the five wonders of the mall, or
Well,
four
she says
wonders of the
4,
mall,
yeah.
which then turns into five once Ellie goes, "Is this it?" Like when she sees, she says, "Move electronic stairs." Is that what she calls an escalator? Um, so Ellie is mesmerized by the escalator, is like thrilled, absolutely thrilled with it, running up and down. Um, and you can kind of just see Riley being like, "This is adorable. This is amazing that she cares so much about this thing." So she goes, "Okay, it's now five wonders of the mall. This is the first one." Um, I kind of like that.
This also, I think, is important, just like with the setting probably being the closest thing to maybe referencing Dawn of the Dead in terms of just the
Sure.
location. And you mentioned the helicopter from the that was omitted in George Romero's version of Dawn of the Dead. The main cast of characters take a helicopter and fly to this abandoned mall and land on the top of the roof and spend time within and kind of build a life around the amenities that are available to them. So watching this, I mean, even Zack Snyder's film, kind of copies a lot of Romero's movie, but just setting it in this location, you can probably understand why maybe some people with even this episode, but even before, would consider it a zombie series, even though it's they're again, the infected are not zombies.
Yeah.
But this episode, I think, is referencing Dawn of the
Oh,
Dead. And
totally.
even if it isn't doing it intentionally, it's hard not
Not
to
to make
think
those
about it because
comparisons.
of the
Yeah.
mall being such an important part of that original film and even the remake. So it's like when you set, you know, a scenario or a movie or a TV show in a location
A
that has kind of,
post-apocalyptic thing with some monsters that are trying to kill
yeah,
you no
that's
matter
been
what they
made
are.
iconic,
It's
it's hard not
yeah.
to reference the thing that's done it
I think
before
it's
or
intentional, dude.
first.
It,
Yeah.
it has to be intentional. Like, I think The Last of Us knows, okay, our versions aren't zombies; they are different, but for all intents and purposes, like, they are zombies, right? Like, to most people, The Last of Us is a zombie show. Um, it- it's fine. I think that it takes a lot of influence from other zombie fiction and things like that, and post-apocalyptic fiction. So I definitely think the setting of the mall is intentional, and I think you can't help but compare it to Dawn of the Dead. Um, I like this sequence as they are walking through the mall. You get the Dawn of the Wolf Part 2 poster, which I love, which is straight from the games, kind of like a Twilight-esque, werewolf man falling in love with a woman, fake movie, because they walk by a movie theater, which you see a back in 5 minutes sign.
They
outside of the
weren't.
theater. They kind of obscure some of the movies that were playing. So I wish they kind of had um I know in the Austin sequence in the first episode it said Midnight Madness, I think, on one of the theaters.
Oh god, it'd been great if
But
it was
here I
Midnight
don't
Meat
know.
Train.
Yeah. I don't know if here if you could read any of the films that were there. I couldn't.
I couldn't.
Um, so they're kind of walking through this mall, and I'm a sucker for this, and there's one reason why I love post-apocalyptic shows and movies. Like I love seeing, especially period ones, because everything was lost in 2003, and the attention of detail there of them walking through this mall, um, and seeing all these stores and how they looked like in 2003. They have a conversation, and I like these two girls who never really grew up. Uh, Pre-outbreak, because Riley is
17.
17 and Ellie is 14, so they both were born after the outbreak, so they'd have no context for a lot of this stuff other than things they learned about in school and different things. But you see that they walk by a Foot Locker and they walk by uh
The Body
Victoria's
Shop.
Secret, and they kind of talk about the body shop. So they talk about what people wanted to steal in those first moments and loot during the first weekend of the outbreak before everything kind of really went to shit on the Monday. Um, which is very true to life. If something like this was to happen, you would see this where people would loot malls and stores, and I like their conversation of what people wanted and how that was so weird to them, of like what was important to people during these first moments. And it's not necessarily what was important to the everyday person, but like what things people wanted to steal. And they were like, oh, so sneakers but not soap. And then which I thought was interesting. And then they walk over to a Victoria's Secret, which hasn't been really ransacked because there would be no reason to have lingerie in the in the apocalypse. So I like that conversation of them looking at this and going, people wore this shit, and just like, and Riley makes the comment of being like, I'm just imagining you wearing this, and then kind of laughing, and then you can kind of just even see on Ellie's face there, even of being like, shut up, and then just the look, and then her kind of walking over to the mannequin and kind of looking at the lingerie and then looking back and seeing her reflection
Yeah, and
in the
fixing her
mirror there.
hair as
But
well.
yeah, so kind of first alluding to the romantic feelings, pointing out some of the I'll go back to the product placement conversation I had in our original review, which was alluding to a lot of the stuff in this mall. um Again, in the game, all fake stores, they never you're just probably one, not going to pay for the licensing on a lot of this stuff for a video game. The odd time you have real things, like I said, the Etta James song is straight from the game and things like that. But um, having a real, this being a live action adaptation and having real, stores that you would see in a mall, how they looked like in 2003, like I feel like just grounds it. In a way that removes yourself from again, I'm kind of repeating stuff that I've said in previous episodes, but I really think especially in this, because you have so many different brands and so many different stores, that it never feels like product placement. It just feels like it's grounding you in the real world. Like this happened in our world. It's not a video game world. It happened in the real world. So when you see a Victoria's Secret, when you see a Gap, when you see a Panda Express, when you see
Best
like
Buy or
a
Target.
Best Buy or Target, kind of things like that, it really kind of grounds you in the real world. So at this point, they walk over and you see a GameStop at this point, which is a little nod to video games. Um, she tells Riley tells Ellie to close her eyes, and she walks her over to a spot and says to open them. And there is this carousel in the middle of the mall with these gorgeous kind of lights all over it. um Ellie, you can say again, great lighting in this episode, use of lighting from all of the stores, and basically the warm string lighting and that warm kind of orangey yellow light on a lot of things, which is juxtaposed with a lot of neon colors from the other stores and stuff like that. So um Ellie mesmerized by the carousel, Riley turns it on, they go onto the carousel together.
The
um
song that's playing,
and
there's a Muzak or score version of The Cure's "Just Like Heaven" playing.
Oh, thank you,
Yeah,
Eric. Okay. So it's The Cure's Just Like Heaven. Um, I'm gonna write that down just because. Am I creating a playlist about all the music that's in the show? I am, and I try to make a note of each one, but I missed that one. So thank you. Um, they share a moment on the carousel where Ellie makes a joke about Riley being drunk. I forget what it was in reference to, but she's like, "Not yet." Takes out the whiskey. They share some more on this carousel.
It's just also a
I don't know if
nice
I'm
moment
missing.
of
Yeah,
like
levity or
escapism for
yeah,
these characters, because we've talked a lot about this, where it is mostly doom and gloom, and you always kind of know that the show's going to pull the rug from under you emotionally at some point. And to have a moment like this that is both somewhat surreal for these characters, because they've never really experienced it in, they've never had a pre-pandemic or pre-outbreak time, um to have something that is so, you know much just a moment to themselves, and a
a
moment of,
quiet moment too, right? And
yeah,
there's
of peace and perfection, and just kind of, being able to zone out and escape their daily grind. Like, it just is like, you need something like this
yeah,
just to kind of, again, show that, like, these are the things worth fighting for, and also the little things in life that make it worth living. So
yeah, because they just kind of sit on this carousel after they share some more of the whiskey, and they kind of just don't even talk. They just kind of sit for a little while, and you can see them kind of thinking, and Ellie thinking to herself. And then the carousel breaks down in the middle of them sharing this really nice moment. Riley's gonna go fix the carousel.
oh yeah,
Um,
originally she's like, "Oh, I'll go and fix this," and then they
and
kind of
then
have
Ellie, yeah,
their conversation about Riley leaving, and then Riley reveals that, because
yes,
she's
this is the moment I
17,
was, yeah.
that she was given sewage duty, and that she didn't want to stay and become a grunt, basically.
Yeah, it basically goes back to, I don't know if that was the actual conversation when I said, "Do you want to be in control or shoveling shit?" But that was alluding to this, assignment that Riley got, where Ellie does ask Riley, being like, "Did you leave because you could actually think you could liberate the quarantine zone with the Fireflies?" And this is when, yeah, Eric just mentioned it. Riley reveals that she's about to turn 18, which is when you get your assignment from Fedra of what you're going to do. And she was assigned sewage duty, which was literally guarding people who were shoveling shit, essentially. And she's like, "That's all they thought of me, is like, that's all I could do." So basically, someone who believes in themselves more than just being someone who guards people shoveling shit, and couldn't deal with that anymore, which is why she ran away, and trying to explain to Ellie um, why she did it, because I think Ellie's still hurt of why she ran away and didn't know, right? Just left her there with Fedra as she kind of ran away. But you're also understanding Riley's side, who is a few years older, which you mentioned, Eric, and the differences there of someone who looks up to that person, but also is in a different point of their life, where Ellie still has a couple years to figure out, what she wants to do or whatever with Fedra, what she wants to do with her life. And Riley has to kind of deal with that in that moment. So
Yeah, it's a really
you can
well
see
played scene. Storm Reed did some
is
really
great.
good
Yeah.
work here, and yeah, it's been a good couple months for her, because she was also the lead in Missing, which is
I
kind of
still
a
need to
fun
see.
little
Yeah.
movie, sequel, or in the same universe as Searching with John Cho. Yeah, it's one of those moments where it's like, you begin to not only understand where the characters are coming from, in terms of, that divide, but um the idea of, Fedra is es- basically giving work to do to adolescents. Like, they're putting them out there in the field at such an early age, and that's, it might be sewage duty today, or being a guard today, but then tomorrow you're, tasked with a position that will basically, you know show you as an expendable, and somebody that is, willing to be sacrificed in order to make way for the officers or the officials. So you really do get why Riley left at this point.
Yeah, and she says the longer I was away, the harder it was to, come back after she left, and she mentions like Ellie was the only thing that she actually missed, from that military school, and you can kind of see a smile um, from Ellie at that moment. Um, so this leads us to her going, well, can I show you some more of the wonders? And then Ellie sees a photo booth that is right behind the carousel. So they head over to the photo booth. I like Ellie yelling "fuck you" at the little bunny that's trying to tell them what to do.
Silly rabbit
um,
photo booths are for kids.
and I just like her kind of consistently always pushing back on authority, even if it's a rabbit telling her what to do.
The Star Shot
Um,
photo booth.
yeah. So she realizes that they don't have any money. It costs $5 to do it. Obviously, Riley is prepared for that. She has a $5 bill because this was part of her whole plan for the night. I like Ellie being impatient as well, being like, let's go, bunny, and hitting the button a bunch of times. This moment ripped straight from the game as well. One of the best moments from this little uh, uh, downloadable content section of them taking these photos together. So, um, I like the pure kind of adrenaline rush and them panicking, only having 3 seconds to plan each kind of pose, and just the childlike nature of the whole thing and the friendship and some of those romantic hints as well. Like even after they take the 4 photos of Riley holding on a little bit longer after the photos taken, and Ellie kind of pushing her off and being like, "Okay, that's enough," kind of thing, because still not knowing how to kind of go through all of this. Um, I like them not understanding how the photos develop either, and them going, "Oh shit," like thinking that they're fucked up, I think, because they aren't developed quite yet. But are seeing them kind of develop. Um, just like their relationship is developing throughout this, Eric.
So
That's
cheesy.
called criticism. That's called analysis. Um, that's really not. So she goes, okay, more things to see. They leave out of the photo booth and walk through. Ellie starts to hear some noises, and Riley goes, "Listen, listen," and you hear some kind of pinball noises and some other things. Ellie gets excited, runs past, and then we cut to this fantastic. I love a pink and blue neon, everyone, as you can kind of see behind me if you're watching.
I like how you're
Um,
pointing to your
the
TV.
Well, there's lights
I know
around the
there's like
TV.
emanating from behind it, or
Um,
like, but like
which is
it
the exact colors used at Raja's arcade in
yes.
this shot. So it's a wonderfully symmetrical shot of Riley and Ellie looking into this arcade with all these pink and blue lights, the noises that you would hear from a classic arcade, the pinball, the arcade machines. Ellie goes, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life," and then Riley goes, "Yeah," and then they go in, and Ellie wants to play. I forget which game she goes to first. It's not Mortal Kombat quite. Oh, it's Daytona USA, isn't it? Like the racing
Yeah.
game, which I remember. So the Daytona racing game, and she's like, "Oh fuck, we need money." And then there's some bills on the ground. She's like, "We don't need that shit. We need coins." Again, Riley's prepared for this. She knew exactly what to do. Spills a bunch of quarters out from the change machine. Ellie calls her an asshole again, and she mentions how she spent an hour the previous day to try to get it open so they could play arcade games together. Uh, I think this is now when they go straight to the Mortal Kombat machine, right? Riley
Yeah,
leads her over,
we also do
and
see some other games with, like, you
yeah,
mentioned Daytona USA,
Galaga,
Tetris, Attack from
Joust,
Mars.
yeah, Joust, Galaga, um, which I think based off this being based off of a video game, it's a great nod to a lot of the classics. That we're getting a Tetris adaptation in a couple weeks on Apple TV, so an R-rated Tetris movie. I can't wait. We will be reviewing that here. If it's a video game movie, we'll be talking about it over on Untitled Movie Reviews. So keep an eye out for that. But they do walk over to Mortal Kombat 2, which is again a wonderful payoff to that episode with Joel where they see the arcade cabinet in the farmers market store, as well as the poster on the wall from earlier in this episode. So um I'm curious to see like if Ellie only knew of Mortal Kombat through like Riley telling her about it or through magazines, maybe like old electronic gaming monthlies or
She's a
like
big
things, or has
fan
she
of Paul
seen?
W.S. Anderson's movie. Christopher Lambert as Raiden.
It's possible. It's possible. Like never count it out, right? But like or was the Mortal Kombat poster on Riley's side of the room? It was, right?
Yeah.
And then so it seems like something Riley really loved and then told Ellie about. And then Ellie clearly has never played it, but loved it because her best friend loved it. So this is the first time Ellie has played Mortal Kombat. So you see them playing as Melina and Raiden. Um,
Raiden. Is it?
who did I
It's
what?
It's Raiden.
Oh, Raiden? Okay,
Yeah,
whatever. I say Raiden,
Raiden.
you say Raiden. I say tomato, you say tomato.
No,
You're allergic to them anyway.
It's spelled Raiden.
You could say Raiden from that.
It's Raiden. Even in the song, the guy says
Eric,
Raiden.
okay, I said Raiden, it's Raiden, whatever. Raiden versus Molina, they share a couple
Flawless
games there of Ellie
victory.
trying to, yeah, not a flawless victory by me. But Ellie trying to learn the controls, Riley wins. They basically play a couple games. We see the fatality from Molina, which is something Ellie brought up to Joel in that episode of spitting the bones out kind of thing. It's at that this moment which we get the most Stranger Things ass sequence from this show, which is a slow pan out of the arcade, which then pans into another shop, which is a toy shop, I believe, right? With the looks like fucking Annabelle in the window when they pan in. Um, and the creepiest looking toy shop where they pan over and to me, this just reminded me of the second season of Stranger Things that took place in the mall in the 80s. And with those, it just reminded me of the most Stranger Things ass thing. I don't know if we needed this. I guess you need to establish that there is going to be maybe um, some infected in this mall that are still around. But do you think that was necessary? Because I feel like we could have just had the infected come in at the end and we didn't need this establishing shot. Or is that just me?
I
Do you need
guess,
it?
but maybe you have this to set it up, and I think if you just kind of had like it burst in like at a random moment, it kind of would have been a little bit more jarring.
Little
And
bit like where were they the whole time? Yeah.
yeah, and I think with it kind of being, I mean, it's overdone.
Yeah.
It could have just been simply like you see, them panning outside of the arcade and maybe seeing like a trail of fungus somewhere, and just know that like,
I
oh,
would have
this
even
is
liked
coming
like
up.
we've established that they're all connected, and if you step like we haven't really used that all that much where, okay, they're connected through the ground, right? And if you step on a patch of the fungus over here, it's going to alert another one. Like I would have even liked something maybe even a little bit more subtle. Maybe it's still not subtle because you hold on it or you see them walk over a patch of fungus that they didn't realize that they were stepping on or something like that. And then if you're paying attention, you know what happened there. And then the payoff is that it did alert something that comes after them. I just think the slow pan out of the game, the arcade panning into the infected in the wall, a little much for me, and did remind me of something out of Stranger Things. I like Stranger Things. Very different show than The Last of Us, where I would expect Stranger Things to do that, where I'm like, I don't know, I think you guys could have done something a little bit more clever or subtle, and maybe originally they didn't have that in there, and then someone was like, it feels kind of random for an infected to run in, so we need to insert this kind of shot to prep audiences for it. Maybe it's something like that. So I don't know. We cut to them playing Mortal Kombat again. Ellie's able to do a fatality as Baraka. Did I pronounce that right, Eric? Is it
I
Baraka?
I think so.
Um, fucking asshole. Uh,
Obama, Barack
God.
Obama.
Um, he's probably long gone by this point, or maybe Obama's still alive in this universe
Well, I want to
somewhere, but
know
he
if Eddie
wasn't.
Vedder's around. Is he in the Seattle QZ?
Well, that's what I mean. Like, if he is, then there's a way that Joel can still know how to, you know, play future days. So, we'll see. Um, so anyways, Ellie's able to do the fatality as Baraka. There's this moment where it almost looks like Ellie wants to kiss Riley at this moment. Um, but then Riley kind of plays it off and says, "Come on, let's go do the next thing." And you can kind of see Ellie hesitating and thinking again. These again, great acting from Bella Ramsey. Like it's a lot of the stuff that I said about Pedro Pascal in this series where the shot will linger on him and it's a lot of the expression in his face rather than just outwardly with just performing through words. And I know that's a huge part of acting, but both of them are so good at that, I think, and especially in this episode of them again, if you don't know what's happening, like I feel like you could go back and go, "Oh, it was there the whole time." That romantic kind of thought through Ellie's head throughout this whole episode. You can tell that when she was sort of leaning in for the kiss or sort of thinking about the kiss and Riley doesn't necessarily pull away but might not have the same feelings as Ellie in those moments. Ellie then gets frustrated or sad, um, and says like, I think I gotta go. They're gonna find me in like I'm supposed to be in bed soon. So I'm just gonna leave. Or maybe she's doubting how she's feeling and doesn't know how to kind of proceed. So she just wants to push Riley away. Again, much like Joel and Ellie's relationship, obviously not romantic in any sense. But you see a lot of similarities of, when someone is pushing someone away because of their feelings for someone, right? And I feel like Joel with that fatherly kind of like thinking about his daughter and thinking about Ellie and doing similar things of just pushing someone away because they think that that's what's best because they care too much or anything like that. I think there's some juxtaposition there as well. But um,
And also,
yeah,
he had experience with the Fireflies as well, so
yeah. So um, Riley goes, "You don't need to be in bed for a while. You got plenty of time." Like she can kind of understand that Ellie is just trying to get out of this.
I got you a gift.
Um, yeah, she goes, "I got you a gift."
It's Raiden.
This uh, new character in Mortal Kombat, Raiden. Um,
It is Raiden, God damn it!
Okay, all right, whatever. This is when they walk through the food court. I'll shout out Panda Express, Thai Express, and A&W, which I don't know if that's they do have A&W in the US, right? Like I guess
Yeah.
because like I always thought that was a Canadian
Well, I thought Thai
thing,
Express
but
was a Canadian thing, but
it might be because like it is shot in Calgary,
yeah.
obviously, right? And
I mean,
Panda
you forgot the
Express
most important one though, as seen in the Red Dawn remake, Subway.
Subway. Oh, we get Subway. So any post-apocalyptic show needs a Subway. um, the Subway, I will say, if I'm being completely honest, don't know if that's how Subway looked in 2003. That looks like a pretty modern Subway. The Panda Express looks pretty accurate for 2003. Um, but Subway looks weirdly sort of like the modern Subway logo, but maybe they already had that logo in 2003. I'm not a Subway aficionado. We also see a Starbucks coming soon spot in the food cart as well, I believe. So I'm
Another
always just going to
reference
shout
to
out
Eddie
the little.
Vedder and Pearl Jam because they're a Seattle band.
Oh, okay, cool. I don't know anything about music. That's why I'm glad you're here. Um, they go into the very real restaurant Macho Nacho. um, I wish this was just a Taco Bell personally. Like every food court isn't complete unless it has a Taco Bell, and I would have loved this to be Taco Bell. Although I could be wrong. It's been a while since I played Left Behind. This could be a direct reference to something
I
like one
thought
of
you,
the
I thought you were going to say it's been
what?
a while since I've been in a food court.
No, it hasn't. I'm frequent food courts. Um, I was in a food court 2 days ago at Yorkdale Mall after I saw
Cocaine
Cocaine
Bear.
Bear, which you guys can check our review right now, which is over on Untitled Movie Reviews. Um, Macho Nacho might be a direct reference to one of the fake restaurants from the game. I just don't. It's been a little while since I played Left Behind. Ellie wonders if her gift is tacos. We kind of laugh about that. They go into the back of this Macho Nacho. Still wish it was a Taco Bell, where Riley has clearly been stationed by the Fireflies. She is living in the mall in the Macho Nacho, and she gives Ellie a gift, which is the No Pun Intended Volume 2 book, which I believe is that the one that she's actually reading to Joel, right?
I think so,
Like
yeah.
reading the puns out of rather than the first one because she's probably exhausted the first one. So uh she gives Ellie the gift of No Pun Intended Volume 2, uh tells her a cannibal joke about the frustrated cannibal who threw up his hands. Very funny pun. I think the best joke in the episode is the screenshot pun. There's the triangle and square pun, but I love the idea that they didn't grow up with computers and before the outbreak. So how does a computer get drunk? It takes screenshots, and like they're just like, I don't get it. What are screenshots? Think it's a cute bit. It's a funny bit about
It's
them
hilarious.
growing up.
It's no Raiden.
Uh, fuck you. Um, at this point, Ellie's
Raiden.
kind of and Ellie looks around the place and finds these pipe bombs that Riley has been making. And Ellie asked, you are these to kill soldiers, I believe is what she asks her. Um and she's like, is this what you're doing here? They posted you here. So she questions like why she's at the mall. So it wasn't necessarily something that Riley found and thought Ellie would love. It's that she's been spending time here because of the Fireflies and been living here, which is why she was familiar with the arcade and played Mortal Kombat before and all these kind of different things. So, and especially because of the violence aspect, which is interesting because of how they've been playing up Ellie of being kind of not being more okay with violence, um, or even kind of wanting to be violent, um, but seeing maybe how her, perception of the world kind of changed after these moments with Riley in this episode, because she's kind of disappointed that she's making pipe bombs and wanting to hurt Fedra officers and things like that. Um, so they have this emotional moment where she just like passes her the pipe bomb, and then I think this is Ellie walks off. And is it right away here where Riley kind of tells her? Um, they just get basically saying
So
it wasn't
they
Ellie's
leave
mad
the
that
back of
yeah.
Macho Nacho, and then basically you have Ellie wanting to leave, and then outside of Macho Nacho and in the food court, it's her being like, "Oh, I wanted, this is my last night in Boston. They're moving me to the
Yes.
Atlantic
This is when she
QZ,"
reveals, yeah.
and how um she asked Marlene, the woman who recruited her, if Ellie
Ellie
could
could
come with
come. Yeah.
her, but Marlene said no, and um, she was trying to find a way to say goodbye, and then Ellie coldly says, "Well, you just said it," and then Ellie starts to leave.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think a great emotional conversation of Riley saying, like, I just wanted to, you know, I want you to come with me. And that's why I wanted this one last night here as well. And basically Marlene said no, right?
Yeah.
Because then we know that there's some history there as well. Um, so that's why she just wanted to have this last night in Boston with Ellie to say goodbye. And then, like you mentioned, she just walks off.
There's another
Um,
thing now that we've talked about this, that uh, is kind of like a suspension of disbelief thing that maybe doesn't work completely. The activation of of this infected, if Riley has been stationed in this area for as long as she had, one, you would think that maybe the Fireflies would have already scoped out the area and found this infected and killed it, or B, you think that Riley's presence for as long as she had been there, because she's probably been there for at least
3 weeks, 2
three
weeks at
weeks,
least, probably.
would have already disturbed or woken it up in some way.
I think that's a great point that I didn't really think of. Is like 'cause she's clearly talked about how she's played Mortal Kombat, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's why she knows the controls and the fatality and things like that, meaning she's turned the power on and she's gone to the arcade and, w like, the noise, maybe it's from them laughing, is louder than the arcade noise, which might just be kinda white noise, background noise that wouldn't I agree with you that there's some suspension of disbelief there of, like, she wouldn't have alerted this infected, or maybe it was dormant until this moment because we do see it, like, growing into the wall, so it's been there for quite some time,
It's been a
but
while.
yeah, no stained in this episode though. Um, Unfortunately. Yeah, so I agree with you there. And that goes back to me, with what I was saying earlier of like they maybe needed to work on that bit of the infected being here a little bit more. Because it just feels convenient how it all plays out, much like the guy falling from the thing at the right time, right? It's more for, hey, we need this to happen. So forget everything you know. That's how it's going to happen. Rather than it being like a logical kind of thing. Like, mind you, I understand if the Fireflies never even were at this mall. Like, it could have just been Marlene meeting up with um Riley and saying, now this is your area because we know it's not crawling with infected anymore. And maybe they missed one. But I do agree if she's been there for a couple weeks that it probably would have woken up, right? So
Yeah. And
anyway.
also if you're
um
living in a mall and you're sleeping in the back of a Macho Nacho, wouldn't you want to like look around and see if there's like a furniture store and get like a better mattress to like lay down somewhere?
because she's just on a sleeping bag, right?
Yeah.
But maybe one of the that's what, like, the Target's got to have some of that stuff, right? I know I don't
Yeah.
think Target sells beds, but like you got to think that there's something, an air mattress, something in this mall, but maybe it's all rated.
Raiden.
I Uh, okay. Ellie's kind of mad. She's walking out, but then she hears screams um as she's walking out. So she's worried about Riley at this moment. So she runs back. Is like, Riley, Riley. Runs into a Halloween store or like a costume thing and sees that the screaming is coming from a skeleton prop that is popping out of the ground, and goes, what the fuck? And then Riley clearly triggered it and goes surprise and lured Ellie kind of back, but is clearly upset about of what happened. And then she knew that Ellie would like this Halloween store, so she's like, I saved it for last, to show you. Um, I forget the details of this conversation here, but this is when Ellie sits down. Riley gives her the no pun intended gift. Um,
They talk
they kind
Riley talks about having had a family and that even though she only had them for a short time, they were hers, and that was like the conversation
yeah,
of partly why she joined the Fireflies, because even though maybe they're not um the place to be or the people that are going to lead the way in fighting against Fedra, it kind of felt like a family scenario in some ways.
right. Where she didn't really have that other than Ellie
Yeah.
at the military school. Um, Saying like basically like Ellie thinks that she knows everything, but she doesn't know everything.
Yeah.
Um, so then they kind of share this kind of nice moment together, and then Riley goes, "Oh, here, I got one more thing. Give me your Walkman." Or she stole the
She
Walkman,
had
right?
the yeah,
Like,
and
and
she's like,
then
"Oh,
yeah,
it's a good thing you came back."
yeah. Well, she kind of knew that she probably would come back, or that was a reason for Ellie to come back. So even if Ellie didn't hear the screaming from the skeleton, I'm sure she would have realized that her Walkman was stolen, that she would have gotten back. So it's a clever thing by Riley to make sure that um yeah. Yes, like Riley even makes a joke that I was definitely probably going to give it back to you. This scene, like I mentioned, rips straight from the games. They put two sequences together, like the Halloween shop and the dance sequence are two separate things. You explore the Halloween shop and put the masks on, which are straight from the game in a different sequence. They kind of combine both of those because the dancing doesn't really happen with the masks in the game. But this sequence of them dancing on the glass countertop and them together to Etta James's "I Got You, Babe" is straight from the game. And again, a nice, much like the carousel sequence, just like a nice moment between these two girls that we know is going to be ruined at any moment because they did show us the infected earlier, but just like a good moment of levity of them just being kids and being friends and them dancing with these two Halloween masks on, one
A
being a
wolf
werewolf
mask.
and a clown mask.
It would have been better if it
um
was the clown face from Twisted Metal.
That would have been maybe too on the clown nose, but, I think especially with Twisted Metal being it could have been if you wanted to keep the video game references, but, um, just a nice sequence of them dancing, Ellie slowly stopping dancing, taking the mask off, um, Riley going, "What?" And then Ellie going, "Don't go." And then Riley going, "Okay." And then they kinda share a kiss. Ellie finally goes in, apologizes right afterwards, and then Riley goes, "For what?" And then they kinda laugh together. And then, Ellie goes, "Well, what do we do now?" And then I forget what Riley responds with. "We'll figure it
She,
out," or something like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
or
like it's no rush and what have you, but little do they know,
we
uh,
know though, because they clearly showed
Fungus
us.
Boy is coming in.
Yeah. So they hear some noises. Riley pulls out her gun, and yeah, Fungus Boy, which we'll call Raiden. Raiden runs in, um, attacks them, um, grabs Ellie. Ellie stabs him a few times. They're running away, tackles her through some of the costumes, and on top of him, uh, just a brutal sequence of him crawling all over him, attacking both Riley and Ellie. Uh, Ellie finally gets Raiden off of Riley by stabbing him in the head. Um, and which again I keep loving because that's exactly kind of how they would do it in the games, when you take down clickers and things like that. I
And it
think this
goes
was
back to
a
that
runner
farmer's
though.
market again, right?
um,
With the one infected who's kind of trapped under all that rubble and her stabbing it in the head.
in the head, yeah, of just knowing how to take them down. At this moment after she's killed him, Riley's kind of looking distraught and looks down at her arm but then looks over at Ellie.
Well, no,
um,
Ellie
and
is the first one to reveal that she's been bit,
yeah, but I
and
think
she.
Riley looks down first and then looks at Ellie, and then
Oh,
Ellie
right,
kind
right.
of reveals that she's been bitten, and screams no, which is like we never see the bites happen again, which they haven't really, other than the creepy kiss with Tess, we haven't seen the infected actually bite anyone. It's usually revealed after, which I think always plays better, right?
Yeah.
Even though you go, when was the moment that it happened? But it's kinetic and crazy, so it's hard to kind of pinpoint the exact moment. But the reveal that Ellie's been bitten, which is the original bite we know Ellie to get. So at this point, Ellie does not know that she is immune. It's the first time she's been bitten. And then Riley reveals that she was also bitten on the hand. Um, Great acting from both of them in this moment too. Much like Bella Ramsey's performance when the Sam and Henry moment happens. Of I think just she's been great at these hugely emotional kind of moments of both panic and just pure fear. Um, at this moment, we then cut back to Ellie in the present, um, about to open that door. So, as Eric mentioned earlier, this whole flashback was kind of her memory of this last night, with Riley, um, and her probably in that moment going, I'm remembering, which we'll see in a moment, of her remembering that you can take the easy way out or you can basically, uh, you know, stay and fight or just figure this out. And
Well,
she
have
runs through.
enjoy the time that you have left, right? And
Yeah,
like, the line being, "We'll lose our minds together," is like cliched as it
together. Yeah.
sounds.
Yeah, I know, but I think that is good. But you do
Well, no,
flash
I
back
don't
between
mean I don't
Ellie.
mean I think it's cliched. Riley says like,
Oh,
"Oh, it
Riley
sounds kind
says
of
that. It's kind
corny."
of corny. No, which I totally understand. But we do get like Ellie being visibly angry about this and smashing all the stuff in the store. And then we get that conversation that you just brought up. So just juxtaposing the last moments with Riley fueling how Ellie feels about this moment with Joel, where she's running through the house frantically trying to find him something to help him with his injury instead of kind of just taking the easy way out. And I think again, it goes back to every guest appearance and guest character we've gotten into this show fuels the motivations and fuels the character development for Joel and Ellie in that moment. And even if it's very blatantly showed to us and cut between them, I still think it does a great job of understanding what these characters are going through in moment by moment, and why she ultimately stays with Joel and tries to help him and doesn't want to lose another person that she cares about and doesn't want to end up alone, which is something she mentions to Sam, which is her greatest fear and things like that because she's lost everyone. And it goes back to that one conversation she has with Joel. So, yeah, they share this moment of saying like we could easily kill ourselves. It would be painless with Riley's gun, or the line that Eric mentioned that they can stay and lose their minds together. it then it then cuts back to Ellie in the present, who runs through the house. She finds some needle and thread, and then runs back down to Joel, which Joel seems surprised that she has not left. Not saying anything, but obviously in a lot of pain and in shock. And there's a great shot of Ellie grabbing his hand and him kind of squeezing back. Um, which I think, the show has done such a great job at the slow build of the relationship between the two characters, of them still being distant. Even in the last episode, Joel's still trying to push Ellie away, but does care about her. And then you start to get the seeds of that as he finally, she makes the choice to go with him. He makes the choice to continue the journey with her. And then uh this happening, he's still trying to push her away, but she comes back, and just that shot of them holding, like her grabbing his hand and him squeezing back with whatever ounce of energy he has left, and then her performing, basically giving him stitches with this needle and thread and sewing his wound up, which I hope she can get him some antibiotics, because even Nevis brought up, she's like, did she disinfect that? I'm like, I don't know if she can. Nevis, I think you just got to kind of do your best in that moment and think about the consequences after. You just got to heal that wound up. So Ellie ends up sewing Joel's stab wound up, um, and basically that's how the episode ends.
Hmm.
And that is episode 7, Left Behind. We don't cut back to Riley turning. We don't cut back to anything. We just kind of know at that point we're caught up to basically, where we were at the beginning of this show, where, we know what happened is like Riley turned and Ellie realized she was immune, right? And we don't necessarily need to see um, that very tough moment for Ellie. We just kind of know that she went through that, and that is episode 7 of The Last of Us. Thank you, Eric, for helping me through that breakdown. Again, I agree with you with the Joel stuff of like there might be people being like, oh man, we got to wait. I'm surprised with how many episodes that they kind of not remove Joel, but like they go, okay, we're going to tell you, Bill and Frank or Henry and Sam's story or Kathleen's stuff. And in this moment, Ellie's obviously the lead of the show as well, but very little Joel in this episode, and we're left to go, can Ellie kind of save him? So we will find out with only 2 episodes left, right?
Yes, both directed
Um,
by Ali Abassi, who is the director of Border and Holy Spider.
yeah. And a little tease: next week's episode is quite. The next 2 episodes are fantastic. But if fans
Oh,
of the game know
we got a
where,
super creep in the next episode.
yeah, fans of the game will know what we're talking about, and you'll know where this is going. But yeah, there's another great guest actor, a couple of them. Actually, in the next 2 episodes, there's like three guest actors. 2 of them being um, cameo-ish, but still very great. And then there's one guest actor who is just has one of the most disturbing and creepy performances of the year. So I'm very excited to talk about that. This show just continues to be fantastic. I am so happy how well it's doing on HBO. It seems like it's that in that 7 to 8 million viewer range every week, and that's just absolutely wild. Just behind Game of Thrones' viewership on HBO. So yeah, we're nearing the end though, which is kind of sad. But
What are
I'm
we gonna do with
excited to
our
see.
lives?
I'll play the game over and over again and play part two probably. I should play part two and let you stream it or watch it just so you can get that, and then we'll both be on the same
Live stream
page.
it on Twitch.
Um, yeah, just for you though. um, and I'm excited to see what conversations we get over the next two episodes, and especially so our plans are we will be doing a breakdown for episode 8 and episode 9, which will be at 10 p.m. Eastern, the Sundays right after the episode airs. And then after the series is done, we'll do a bit of like a spoiler cast kind of predictions on where season 2 will go. And um we'll let you know if I'm going to include spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2 in that or not, but we'll probably do a little bit of both in that just to kind of have an interesting conversation. But I love doing this show. Can't wait for next week. Please check out our other podcast we do. Untitled Movie Podcast episode 145 should be up or up soon this week, where I talk about my experience going to Disney World and Universal Studios Orlando. We also have a review up for Cocaine Bear and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. So those are our newest reviews over on the Untitled Movie Reviews channel. You can get everything over on YouTube, as well as our one-stop shop over on Letterbox, which has all of our podcasts, video and audio, which is Untitled_movies over on Letterboxd. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at untitledmoviepodcast.com. And you can follow me on all of those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time,
It's Raiden.
bye, everyone.